Hey everyone, this is Jaclyn here. So this is my third entry for a video blog I started earlier this year about continuing the dialogue on mental health, especially for folks like me who are not diagnosed with mental health issues, but know people who do. It's important for everyone to talk about mental health, whether you have mental health issues or not, but more so for communities that stigmatize mental health issues, such as the East Asian community, which is what I identify with. So for more context as to why I'm doing this, please check out my first video 2 months ago, back in January. Today, I'd like to talk about why self-care is important for ourselves as well as for others. I'll also be sharing one method of self-care that I practice in my life, and I actually have a little treat for you, which I'll show later on. Little walk down Jaclyn's history lane. So, self-care for me is what it really means in the words itself. So taking care of self. In an ideal world, I believe we wouldn't need to do self-care because everyone would be in supportive relationships and treating each other fairly. But because we're not in those circumstances, I believe self-care is a major part of everyone's lives. As someone who is not diagnosed with mental health issues, but is aware of people with mental health issues, people in my life, my social circles, my work, as a bystander to someone with mental health issues, it has been and still is painful. I'm not saying this in a way that or to compare my experiences with those with mental health issues, nor am I making this about me, but what I'm referring to is how I've felt guilty for not being a better friend and person in their life or their lives, feeling confused and frustrated with not knowing what to do or how to help, feeling angry that they don't share with me what they're going through or avoiding me. With self-care, I was able to acknowledge those feelings and how unhelpful those feelings were towards people with mental health issues. It's also made me turn towards my own mental health and figure out how I can be a better person to support others. So I can share one realization I came across or eventually embraced, which is that sometimes I might not be the person to help them. They might need different people or resources, and I learned that all I can do is to wait on the side and be ready for them when they need me. And that was a struggle for me to understand, because I generally like to help others. So I believe self-care it's a light in the darkness, because especially for communities that stigmatize mental health, it's not talked about in East Asian communities because there's a lot of shame and stigma around having mental health issues. So suppressing feelings and emotions and mental health issues. And it's a topic I'd like to get into more into the future. But for now, I'd like to emphasize that finding yourself in a community where you have no one or not many people to talk about mental health, not knowing or being embarrassed to reach out to mental health issues or mental health services, sorry, or not having the financial resources to seek professionals, journaling became a very feasible means to start looking into my mental health and self-care. So this is a practice that I started several years ago, or in fact, many years ago. And journaling is a practice that is so open-ended that you can make it to whatever you like it to be. So there are many ways of journaling. The typical one is writing, which I do, but there's also drawing, sketching, making charts or tables. I've made pros and cons lists, many of them, visual maps, poetry, lots and lots of ways to journal. And I like to think of it as externalizing my thoughts into written words. So rather than letting them go circle around in my head, I'm literally removing them from my mind. So it helps me with that reflection process. So for example, I'd have an angry thought and it'd be swirling around in my head, but when I write it down on paper, I visually see the words and then go, that's pretty angry of me. It's almost as if I'm detaching myself from the thought and then be able to distinguish or separate the emotion from the thought. In that way, the issue becomes a little bit clearer to me, because I find that if it stays in my head, the emotion tends to blur or intensify the thought, which distracts me from day-to-day tasks. And I'm sure this works with audio recordings if you prefer not to write, but I don't like the sound of my voice on recordings, so I prefer writing. I find that it starts becoming a conversation with yourself, and it helps with listening to your thoughts, which I believe contributes to getting a better sense of yourself. And there's no filter in what you can say, no filter in what to write or say, or interpret or express. So say whatever you want to say. So for instance, you can be doing free write, you can put in slang, acronyms even, like LOL, and it's fantastic for venting. You can even swear if you generally don't tend to swear, and it's in some ways it's therapeutic to do so. And I sometimes even write fillers in there, like ums and ahs, because it lets me pause at my thoughts. And I would tend to ramble. I think there's times where I would write the same thought, but in 5 different ways. But then I eventually get to a point where I see that pattern, which at that point I'd go, oh, so that's what's been bugging me, because I've written 5 times. And then I move forward from there. It's also about questioning constantly. And the goal is not necessarily about finding answers. It's great to find them, but sometimes it's just about moving forward or moving to a new position with your thoughts. And let me tell you, that's progress. And there's a few times I kind of pat myself in the back and let myself feel smug about it, because it feels so good to figure something out on your own. And no one's judging you, no one's judging your journaling. You can be scribbling, writing furiously, or sometimes you can take the time to write gracefully, and no one's there to mark it, so grammar and spelling do not matter, and there's no need for full sentences. I generally date them because the year and date does provide a bit of context as to when it happened, how old you were, and what you were doing back then. And when you have the time, you casually can flip back to them and skim through them. And for me, most of the time, it's funny, or I might say, oh wow, I was like back then. I was like that back then. There's no timeline either, or scheduling. You don't have to journal every Wednesday or every second week of the month. You can write whenever you feel like, but one thing I try to practice is not only journal during frustrating times, but also during positive, happy times, because those are just as important for your growth. And you have a choice. To me, I think you have a choice to definitely have a choice to let others see it or not. I don't think you should be pressured to share it with a partner or a friend, but if you feel comfortable to do so, you can. So it kind of goes back to the basic concept of consent. So my little treat for you is that I found some old journals. In fact, my first journal, which I actually called diary, which I could sense a little bit of negative connotation, but it really is just journaling. So I found this back at my parents' house, and you can see it actually does say diary. And I think the hilarious part is there's actually a lock and with the keys attached. So I'm not even sure if that matters, but I think as a child I felt like these were my secrets and that I was writing my thoughts in this book. So yeah, so there's that. I thought it was cute. Now it's tacky. There's tons of journals too. I have shelves of them. This one I started just a casual thing. This is one I'm writing in right now. So you can pick and choose and have different colors and styles. There's even, and if your friends find out that you do like journaling or writing, they buy you stuff like this, so it's pretty cool. So you really can have a lot of fun with journaling. And I think you can type it out, but it gives you the option to easily erase your thoughts. And so I think it's still meaningful to sometimes write down your thoughts, because you could be writing the same thought multiple times until you actually get it. And writing on single sheets, it's also not a bad thing. I've done that before as well, but a journal does keep your thoughts together. So there are many ways to take care of yourself, but I think journaling is an easy start for folks who are just beginning to explore mental health or find themselves stuck in a community that stigmatizes mental health. It's a first step. So that's it for now. And so, yeah, we'll talk more in April.